So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to July's edition of PAS Club. Cannot believe we're sort of into the seventh one of the year already, which is unbelievable. So we're sort of in the second half of the year already. But yeah, away we go. For those of you who've never been to PAS Club before, these typically take about an hour to run through. So we should be finished pretty much 1 p.m. on the nose. We've got a great range of guests in the room, which we have got Alan Pither from the Retrofit Academy, Chris Parfitt from BEIS, Peter Rickaby from Peter Rickaby Consultancy, and Paul Phillips from TrustMark. So we have had some pre-submitted questions, which we do typically ask for. So we'll run through those in a second. We'll put them to our panel, and obviously they'll do their very best to answer them and guide you and signpost you where they can. And then we'll open it up to you, open up to the room. So you're very welcome to, if you're feeling brave enough, unmute your microphone and ask the question in person. If you can, given the large numbers we're getting in these clubs now, if you can raise your digital hands using the functions on Zoom, that'd be fantastic. And if you've also got a question that you'd rather us or me read out for you, you're welcome to put it in the chat. But we do really try and encourage people to try and vocalise them themselves. It just makes for a much more engaging session, and also it stops you from having to listen to me constantly for the hour. Okay, so let's go with our first pre-submitted question. This is from Adam. So Adam has said or asked, under Annex A, paragraph A.3.6, the qualification requirements for a retrofit designer on Path C protected projects. The retrofit designer must be registered on a conservation scheme run by one of the listed organisations. And where the dwelling is protected, shall be at the highest level available. Does this mean that those on the entry-level conservation schemes with, for example, REBA and CIOB cannot approve these designs, or is this currently being accepted until the PAS 2035 amendment is released? I'll hand over to the floor. Peter or Alan, do you have any thoughts on this?
My reading of it is that they can't approve designs on the entry level, but I don't know whether there's any discussion of an amendment forthcoming. Peter is more likely to know about that than I am. So I don't know if he would like to comment on that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I agree with you, Alan, that at the moment, as it's written, you have to have the highest level if the building is protected. You can have a lower level if the building is traditionally constructed, I think. I was in this morning in a meeting talking about the amendments to the forthcoming update, to PAS 2035, and there is a sort of scoping document, which is, it's not really something for me to divulge at this stage, but as far as I am aware, through the process by which Retrofit Standards Task Group has been collating proposed updates for this year, that isn't one of them. So I don't, unless somebody else comes in and says we want to change this, and I can see an argument for it, I would say that it's probably not likely to change. It's likely to stay as it is. But obviously during the course of an update, there is a public consultation, and people will have the opportunity either through their representatives on the steering group or through the public consultation to suggest that that might be changed. My understanding is there's a capacity issue in there, amongst other things, that it's quite hard to get on that course and get qualified, and it takes a fair amount of time and expense. So I think that the argument could be made for softening that. However, it was the combined heritage lobby that put that into the original PAS, and they're quite a strong-minded group. So I think they would have to be persuaded if we were to soften it in any way.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Alan. I can see that you're on the call there, Adam. Does that answer your question? Is there anything further you wanted to maybe add to that?
Not at all. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Peter, for that. I agree that I think there's a bit of a bottleneck potentially there where, you know, I've heard that there's about 200 people that are that highly certified, and they're busy looking after our grade 1 listed castles, etc. So for our run-of-the-mill retrofit, they might be too busy for that. But yeah, it'd be good to see that, or hopefully a change in the future. But thank you for that.
Okay, thanks, Adam. So let's move on to the second question we've had pre-submitted, and this is from Julian. Hopefully you're there today, Julian. Hello if you are. How is compliance regulation going, specifically in relation to the exclusion of companies which claim to offer past 2035 services, but which, for instance, do not send retrofit coordinators to site at appropriate stages or often enough to meet the protocols? How many firms have been brought to book and with what sanctions? If none, why not?
This is one for TrustMark, isn't it?
I think it is. We've got Paul here. Hello, Paul.
Yep. Good afternoon. With regard to compliance is managed through TrustMark, through scheme providers for both businesses and retrofit coordinators. So where we identify issues, we work with those schemes to ensure that either things are changed, lodgements are updated or superseded as we used to do it. That does work through to some points where compliance cannot be guaranteed. It ends up in businesses being removed at some points. But that is a last resort because we have to try and ensure that the customer ends up in a good position. Removing the business tends to create issues in the fact that we can't get back to remediate those problems. So it is a last resort, but we do work very, very closely with retrofit coordinator schemes and PAS 2030 schemes to ensure that happens. As for the on-site element, that isn't really dictated by PAS. So that is a requirement for the retrofit coordinator to understand when he needs to be on site and what he needs to see. So it's not actually dictated as certain criteria within PAS, so we can't actually enforce that. Very difficult to prove as well.
Sure, tricky one. Any further comments on that? No. Thanks, Paul. I hope that answers your question there, Julian. Thank you for sending that one through for us. Next one, Margaret. Margaret said, we are looking for loft insulation with low embodied carbon to substitute for rigid Celotex, I think you pronounce that, Celotex board, fixed below 50 ventilation gap between and under 100 deep rafters. Any recommendations for low embodied carbon board or slab stiff enough to underline the rafters without more stud work?
Well, my thought on this is, wouldn't a rigid wood fibre board suffice for that? Does anyone else have
Possibly.
any?
Yeah. Anyone else got any thoughts on
more
it?
practical experience than me of these sort of issues. I'm not sure if there's a practical reason why that might not be suitable.
Anybody else got any views? Anybody use any materials that can answer that question or support what Alan's saying? Peter?
I agree with Alan. The only one I could think of was wood fibre board, and it's rigid enough to span between rafters. So I would have thought it would do the job under, and it's obviously easy to put it in between. The only question mark I raised about it for myself was combustibility, but then the roof's made of timber anyway. So there are one or two housing associations that are a bit twitchy about combustible insulation for obvious reasons. So that would need checking, but otherwise I can't think of a better alternative.
Dean, Owen, you've got your hand up. You got a comment on that?
Yeah, just to add that to that discussion, glass mineral fibre may be an option as well. And of course, you need to look at the comparison of low embodied energy or carbon into glass mineral fibre versus the wood fibre or any other insulants. But some manufacturers producing glass mineral fibre now, despite the high energy costs for gas being a key component in the construction or the manufacturing of that material, a minimum of 85% of those products are manufactured a recycled glass fibre, glass bottles, whether that be your Coke bottles, your wine bottles, whatever it may be. So that may also be an option there. They're high performance and can be easily friction fitted as well. So it's something worth considering.
Thanks, Dean. Yeah, appreciate that. Anyone else got any thoughts on that? Or Margaret, if you're there, does that help? I can see you, Margaret.
Hi.
Hiya.
Yeah, I just wondered any names or anybody who's had any experience. I was hoping there might be some glass or mineral fiber, but it appears to mostly be rolls that sag. And so convincing the builders when Celotex is so easy to use something unknown, and they say, well, we don't know where to get it anyway. So I was hoping maybe someone had tackled that.
So sorry to jump in on that, Margaret. As much as yes, rolls can be a little bit more difficult to install, there are semi-rigid friction fit insulation bats specifically designed for those areas where rolls simply aren't suitable. Rolls are fine for lofts or for perhaps partition walls, but there are semi-rigid bats specifically designed for rafter applications, which are available out there.
And are you allowed to say any names or any suppliers?
Yes, of course. Knauf Insulation, they manufacture a rafter roll. Their product is manufactured of at least an 85% content of recycled glass mineral glass bottles. It is a product that we have within our supply chain as well. So it is there. There are alternatives which fit the application, which aren't your loose roll, which can obviously cause issues with the installation detailing.
So I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name again.
Knauf, K-N-A-U-F,
yes,
Knauf Insulation. They've got manufacturing facilities in St Helens in the northwest and Cwmbran in Wales for the UK manufacturing operations.
Yeah, okay, so I need now to find a supplier. Okay, thank you very much, Steve.
Okay.
Peter?
Yeah, I was just wondering about cork.
Cork.
You can get cork in thick and rigidish boards. And indeed, an old UCL colleague of mine, Oliver Wilton, built an entire house out of cork, nothing else. So it's quite a versatile material. I have been told that there isn't very much of it around. And if we started to use it extensively, the world's supply would run out quite quickly, but it might be worth looking at.
Yes, I know Harry Paticus has used a lot of cork.
Yes.
Thank you.
Super. Thanks for your question, Margaret. Thank you for your contributions there, including you, Dean. Appreciate that. Okay, let's move on, shall we? Jenna has got the next question for us. We've heard that it may be possible to use the results of an air tightness test, including a pulse, to bypass ventilation requirements. For example, in a traditional property where it may not be possible to install ventilation because of planning issues, but the property already has a level of background ventilation which would be considered acceptable. Can you comment on this, please?
We've had a similar question before, I think, I think the answer was it's not possible to avoid the need for installing fans with an air tightness test. You can confirm that you're okay with intermittent extract fans as opposed to continuous ventilation, i.e. that the air permeability is greater than 5, but you can't use it to confirm that you don't need any ventilation.
Yeah, if we could just add to that a little bit. There is a scheme put together by the IAA that I've been told, though I don't know, has been accepted by TrustMark, or at least discussed with TrustMark, but which is about really applying the methodology that's in the new Part F of the building regulations instead of what it says in Annex C. And actually, I don't think that's compliant. The building regulations are minimum standards. Annex C is a best practice standard. And one of the problems with the new Part F is that it gives the installer or whoever a perverse incentive, because it gives them incentive to keep the building leaky or to make it more leaky in order to avoid properly improving the background ventilation in a controlled way. So I would agree with Alan that it's not possible to do it the way described. We also, in the amendment to PAS 2035, which was published in January, we did add a line that said that part of the process of insulating the building is deemed to be making it more airtight, not less. So using more leakiness to avoid doing ventilation is completely perverse from the point of view of the direction with which we're trying to take the building stock, which is towards build tight, ventilate right.
Thanks, Peter. Jenna, if you're there, does that help? Does that answer your question? And or does anyone have any comments?
Yes.
Sorry, Jenna.
That does. Thank you. I think it's just we're finding, particularly on sort of labs funding schemes, it's very challenging to get the airtightness work done as well as the insulation measure, sort of within the funding cap. So the question was about, whether a leaky building can essentially be left leaky. But yeah, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying. It's just, in reality, it's proving quite challenging to do that airtightness work.
Sure. Well, doing insulation will do some of the airtightness work for you, and replacing the windows will do a lot of the airtightness work for you. I think what my experience is that what's challenging is putting the background ventilation in that you also need, especially if the windows don't have it. And you know, if you change the windows, it's not a problem. If you're not changing the windows, or the windows have been recently changed and don't have the background ventilators, that's challenging. And my recourse would normally be to using wall vents rather than window vents.
The problem we're finding with that is in properties in conservation areas, you can't sort of just drill a hole in the wall.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it is difficult.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem, Jenna. Thank you for your question. Okay, we are going to be moving on to the last of the pre-submit questions. I can see the chat's actually quite quiet today, which is unusual. So I'm hoping loads of you can have questions that you're going to ask yourselves after this one. So get them at the ready. Okay, so this is from Mohammed. The Retrofit Academy compliance software only gives two choices, full SAP or PHPP. I need an option for RDSAP, as I can only log data from RDSAP. Please, can you advise?
Well, our opinion is that full SAP should be used for the improvement option evaluation rather than RDSAP, and so that's what we put in the software. Selecting full SAP doesn't actually prevent you from entering RDSAP data, and we're aware that a lot of people are doing that. So it's not the outcome we want, but there's not an effective barrier to RDSAP being used in practice if you're able to use that and you can't use full SAP. Yeah,
in fact, PAS 2035 says you can use RDSAP as a methodology for collecting the data, but you must use full SAP to do the IOE or PHPP. And actually, upgrading your data from RDSAP data to full SAP data is not very challenging. It really, you change your survey procedure a little bit and you collect a bit more information, but it's really quite straightforward. And some of the RDSAP software providers have bits of software that help you do that by giving you extra questions that you can put the extra data in, like the window areas. So I would say, by all means, use RDSAP as a methodology for data collection, but as Alan said, for IOEs, you must use full SAP or PHPP.
I would also add that full SAP is much easier to use for IOE.
Yes.
Because RDSAP, you've got to change manually the input data and then interrogate the reports. Whereas full SAP software allows you to save separate versions for each measure. So it's much easier to use and to keep a record of what you've done.
Yeah, it's also worth remembering that if you try and do your IOE with RDSAP, it will pile the measures on top of each other instead of evaluating them separately. So it becomes quite misleading, actually, in the results it gives you.
Yes, if you're using the automatically generated recommendations rather than putting them in manually, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Thanks, Peter. Mohammed, I haven't seen your name. I'm not sure if you're there, but hopefully that answers your question. But in essence, what you're saying in there is that, yeah, you can still obviously lodge with you, or you can still use those details from RDSAP, but just selecting.
The software doesn't stop. Yeah, the software doesn't stop you doing it, but we would discourage it and promote the benefits of using full SAP, both practical and technical.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks, Alan. Okay, so as I said, that is the last of the pre-submitted questions. So that's it in terms of obviously what I've got on screen. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we will now go to the virtual room. I can't see anything in the chat yet, but there is a comment from Mark. And yes, Mark, yeah, welcome. It's your first PAS Club. But yeah, exactly right. So the questions and answers will be circulated as a recording, first and foremost. And the most popular questions and answers from the sessions, and in fact, any questions we get through at the Retrofit Academy go into what's called a PAS Facts document, and that is shared in the knowledge base. So when you go in your membership area, you can go into knowledge base, search by PAS Facts, and you'll be able to obviously get all of those FAQs from there. Okay, so all the questions I think are starting to come through. So Gull has asked a question. A project was completed under Eco3 portal. However, the Eco funder has requested it to be relodged under Eco4 portal. Now as it's available. My question is, if I go ahead and relodge under Eco4, how will TrustMark audit team will review this? How will they audit it? So, Paul, are you there?
Yep, I am. Any Eco4 lodgement will be audited under the Eco4 requirements as well as PAS. It's no different. So whichever scheme you're claiming compliance to, if it's Eco3, Eco4, those rules would apply. But the PAS rules don't change; they're exactly the same all the time.
Thank you, Paul. Hopefully that helps. Cool.
Sorry, Paul. Now the audit will be different. Obviously, if a project was completed under Eco3 portal, the data and audit process would be different because I have to redo the whole paperwork again. It will not have the same audit trail. Will it cause any issue or not?
No. If have you already lodged the job Eco3?
Yes.
And it's completed?
Correct. And certificate has been issued.
Yeah, you can't actually, if you're claiming funding through an Eco3 route, you can't actually then claim that funding through Eco4 route.
The TrustMark certificate has been issued, but the funding has not been claimed under Eco3.
If the certificate has already been issued, that's complete then from our point of view. So that would have been submitted to Ofgem.
Correct.
So we have an API from Ofgem. So once a completed measure or a completed project's complete, that's notifies directly to Ofgem. So you can't actually go back and then do that again as Eco4.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul. Dean, I can see you got your hand up. I don't know if it's a comment on back of that, or you got your own question.
No, I've got my own question, unless anybody else wants to jump in off the back of that comment.
No, I think the floor is yours, Dean. Over to you.
Okay, no, thank you. I just wanted to have a quick discussion regarding ventilation and the changes to Part F, which relate to Annex C. And I know Paul Phillips and myself had a discussion about this earlier on this week, but I wanted to understand more from the Retro Academy's position on what communications you're giving to your members or retrofit coordinators regarding that. As SWIP, we're a system designer with 230 contractors, and it's very important that we're communicating compliance and raising standards where we can. And what I'm communicating right now, that according to Part F, that if your strategy for ventilation is intermittent extract fans, the 8,000 millimeter squared of background ventilation is a requirement under Part F. However, that can be impossible in some circumstances when it comes to retrofitting trickle vents, because simply 8,000 is a very large proportion of background area, and this starts to push rooms into core vent situations. However, if you adopt a continuous mechanical extract, which is our preferred recommendation, then the lesser provision of 4,000 millimeter squared, from my understanding and review of Part F, is there, and that's a much easier way to achieve background ventilation and alleviate that property from any excess moisture. So I just wanted to get an understanding from the Retrofit Academy. Is do you concur with what I've said, and is that the sort of thing you're communicating to your network, and is that the right thing for me to be communicating to my network?
I'm not sure that we're formally communicating anything on this, because I don't think we've updated the guidance since the new Part F came out. But Peter's put his hand up, so maybe he should jump in.
This is what's called buck passing, Alan.
Yeah, well, if I can get away with
Fair
it.
enough, fair enough. Well, the first thing to say is I think the strategy that Dean outlined is absolutely right. Going to continuous ventilation is always going to be better, and it will give you more scope for the future. The reason the background ventilation requirement for continuous ventilation is smaller than for intermittent ventilation is that intermittent ventilation only works for about an hour a day. The intermittent fans are only on, and for the other 23 hours, it's wind-driven in and out ventilation that's doing the job. So you need plenty of aperture. In the case of continuous ventilation, you've got a 24/7 fan, therefore you only need to balance the fan, and that will do the job. So that's why the two requirements in Part F are different. The other thing to say is that Part F is mandatory minimum ventilation requirements, and PAS 2035 is best practice requirements. And so if you're obliged to comply with PAS 2035, you also must comply with the building regs, because that's statutory. And therefore, I think Dean's route of going, I mean, you can quite quickly change an intermittent fan to a continuous decentralized MEV fan, is a very good way of reconciling the two and complying with both PAS 2035 and the building regs.
No, well, thanks, Pete. That's very useful that you've concurred on the thoughts that I've put forward. What we're trying to do is minimise disruption to the householders who already have enough disruption anyway when these measures are being installed, and to have a core vent in every single habitable room potentially is not attractive, and continuous has always been my preferred route, and I'm trying to communicate that to our network of contractors, but the wide industry as well. And I hope the Retrofit Academy will be doing the same for your retrofit coordinators and assessors, and hopefully we can at least have these standards met, whether it be intermittent or whether it be continuous. And intermittent fans aren't being installed with a lesser provision of 8,000 millimeters squared, which some of my fears is probably happening now, but hopefully those standards can be met as soon as possible, and we can all comply with the changes into Part F. But no, thank you for your comments.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks, Peter. Appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to move swiftly on into the chat. We've got a few questions coming through. I think we're in order as best I can. Looks like Nafsika, you were next. So Nafsika's asked, what is the Retrofit Academy's perspective on completing retrospective retrofit assessments when non-compliance is identified?
Thank you. We've had a couple local authorities in the LAD2 project. I'm from Midlands Net Zero Hub, who already are in that situation, and we would like to know what the Retrofit Academy's position is.
Well, the retrofit assessment should always be carried out as a first stage. So I guess it may depend on how far through the project you've got. If it's completely finished, whether there's a value in going back and doing it. I suppose there still would be, because then you would at least have a full improvement option evaluation and medium-term plan in place for any further improvements to the property. So I'm thinking on my feet here, I would think that would be our recommendation.
Yeah, and to comply. You've got to have an assessment. So, and I mean, I think the difficult bit is it's trivial to go off and do an assessment after the event. The key is, does that assessment make you change anything that you've done that you wouldn't have done that way if you'd had the assessment in the first place? And that may be a more challenging part of the process. I mean, I think this is, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this sort of situation has been brought up because the LADs and the SHEF schemes kind of assumed in the bids that you would specify what you were going to do to the dwellings as part of the bid, not as a result of the assessment. And we've had long conversations with BEIS about that, and they're very aware. We've been trying to get them to move future programs to 2 stages, where you do your assessments first, you come up with proper knowledge through an IOE of what you do, and then you bid for the money to do the work. The current BEIS position is that their bosses and the Treasury won't let them do that, but they have said that, I don't know about LADs, but for SHDF, they have just said recently that if you want to do your retrofit assessments before you bid, after the competition is opened, and then use those assessments as part of the process once you get the grant, then obviously that's subject to having a successful bid. But if you do that, they will reimburse the assessment costs as part of the process. So that's a route for helping us to do things in the right order. And I thought I'd saying something Colin King said not long ago, which I think is absolutely right. You know, the quality of your assessment is always reflected in the quality of the work you do to the house. So it's really important to do a good assessment if you possibly can.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Nafsika. Thanks, Peter. Deborah has asked a question for you, Paul Phillips, TrustMark. I've been trying to lodge through Eco4. It's proving very difficult. I've managed to do one. However, the certificate has been sent to the customer and they are not held in the normal data warehouse. I was wondering where the Eco4 certificates are and how I can access them.
Paul put a post in the chat saying he had to leave a few minutes ago. So he's not going to answer that, but I suspect his answer would be,
David, thank you.
They're not lodged with TrustMark either.
Ah,
there you go then. So do you know how we can get copies?
Sorry, it has lodged with, so I did one and you can't get it. And then the second one I did, I put my email and it got sent through to me, and it is, I have got the certificate. So it does exist. There's just no way of getting it.
I think I'm not sure who the right organisation to answer that question is, though. How to do it? It's definitely not us, I'm afraid. And Colin's got a hand up.
Colin's put his hand up.
Oh, okay. So I thought it was the TrustMark because that's how I lodged it through.
Yeah, sorry, I've had this issue myself before, and I contacted TrustMark directly, and they eventually, after a while of trying, sent me the certificate to record. So if you contact TrustMark directly,
yeah, no, I have done.
5 days or more.
Yeah, that's fine.
They should be able to get that back to you.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Colin. Thanks for helping there. Okay, let's move on then. There are a few more that are for TrustMark, but we'll see whether we can kind of get through some of these. But this one is from Martin Waite. Hello, Martin. When modelling first-time central heating, how do I split out the heating controls, TRVs and load compensation, which is required for our submission?
Right, so this is a property that's got storage heaters or something, and you're moving to a boiler-based system. Is that right, Martin?
Oh, we can't hear you, Martin. Oh, go on, speak up, mate. I think we can hear you. Oh no, that doesn't sound right at all.
Not at all, is it?
I know you don't normally sound like that.
Should
you got a voice change on that microphone, I think.
Should I assume my assumption is correct?
No, sorry, Martin, we're really struggling to hear you, mate.
I think he's saying, Luke, I am your father.
Fantastic. I wasn't sure it was Vader or Chewbacca, to be honest. It's a bit of a hybrid, that one. Yeah, really struggling there, Martin. I don't know if you want to just confirm that in the chat in terms of Alan's question.
Well, I can proceed on the assumption that is, I can't think what else, why else he'd be asking the question, thinking about it, because the issue is that you can't model the controls until you've added a boiler system, and so you would have to you can't actually model the controls on their own, so you would have to model the improvements with a basic. I guess you can model a basic boiler system with full controls, and then rerun the SAP calculation with each control separately added in, and then you can see the difference. But I don't know whether that really should be required, given that the controls are required by building regulations anyway. Certainly perhaps not the load compensation, but the others would be. So they would have to be installed. So there's no value in modeling them individually, that particular case. So I think it would be, you know, I would hope no one would be rejecting your submission because they hadn't done that, because it wouldn't make sense.
Thanks, Alan. Does that help,
make
Martin?
sense? No. Do you want to give me a call later, Martin, and we can talk about it one-to-one, and if anyone else is interested in the answer, then let us know and we can distribute it. Or
Lovely.
Yeah,
that's probably the best approach, I think, Alan. Yeah, perhaps you, Martin, pick it between you after the session. That'd be grand. Thank you. Okay, the next question is sort of directed toward BEIS and TrustMark. I know we've obviously got Chris from BEIS here who might be able to sort of offer some guidance and sort of direction on this one. So it's from Craig. Given that Next Energy have completed retrofit on 40 park homes in the Northwest using a Weatherby system, what is the latest direction from BEIS and TrustMark, as other retrofit coordinators are reluctant to undertake similar works without assurance that it will be accepted? Can't hear you, Chris.
Sorry. So BEIS, it's a bit tricky to answer because BEIS in general don't try to advise on which product to use and which not to use. Our requirements are that they have to be compliant with the PAS standards, PAS 2035. So I can't really give a comment on you know, whether or not to proceed with the Weatherby system. I think TrustMark, Paul's gone, isn't he, from TrustMark, so he can't comment on it either. But if I can have a look, if we have received any other kind of similar questions, and get back to you on that one, but I'm afraid I can't give an answer on that straight away.
Do we yet have the Park Homes guide from BEIS, or is it still in dispute?
It's still in dispute from outside on the technical side. Yeah, we're conscious it's been delayed quite a lot, so we're trying to get it out as quick as we can, but it's yeah, there's a bit of a hold up on our side. Yeah. Which I'm conscious with these kind of questions, but I don't want to comment on it. You know, given my technical expertise is not what it.
That's fair enough, Chris. I respect that. I mean, we've got hands up from Dean and Colin. Have you got comments or thoughts on this particular subject?
Mine's on a separate subject, so I'll hang fire unless Colin has something to say. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll come back to you, Dean. Thank you. Colin,
yeah,
have you got a comment?
Yeah, just on this, I surmise he's talking about verge trims and not being able to overhang the roof on a park home, which I believe is in with BRE and under research at this moment in time. But with regards to park homes, it depends on the funding stream. I've done personally over 130 retrofit medium-term plans on park homes, so there's no issue depending on the funding stream. The only issue is regards to installing external wall insulation without the use of verge trims, and on some of the older park homes they don't have overhanging roofs, and as the roof is a separate structure you can't do an overhanging roof. So there is a model going through BRE as discussed, and we're waiting to see what that comes back with. But I don't know of any other issues unless he wants to let us know what the other issues are.
Yeah, Craig, I think you're still there. Craig, do you want to answer that? Thanks, Colin Muller.
Yeah, thanks for the answers. Yeah, we've included park homes in our HUG bid. So it's a bit of a frustration that we're struggling with getting contractors to actually go for the work because of this uncertainty. It's interesting about the BEIS guidance being delayed, but it is to do with the verge trims mainly on the EWI. But it did seem that Next Energy were doing quite well, but they looked like they could be at risk of not getting it passed by TrustMark, which was obviously a bit of a concern.
I think just on that, Craig, sorry, I believe that Next Energy are installing on properties that have got overhanging roofs, so therefore don't need verge trims, and are also installing underfloor insulation on park homes, which are the park homes that they've completed. With regards to yours, I believe at some point in September, October is when BRE is supposed to be announcing whether verge trims are allowed back in or not, and if they are allowed back in, what the solution is to get that back in. If you want to get in touch, feel free to get in touch, Craig, and I'll point you on to the park home installation specialist that I currently deal with, and then we'll see whether they can help you.
That's very good of you, Colin. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. That's great. And yeah, thank you, Craig, for the question and further info on that one. Just quickly skimming through the chat, it looks like there's a couple of comments from Margaret and Adrian. So thank you for those, both regarding the ventilation and air tightness discussed a little bit earlier on. So a little bit more sort of information and sort of thoughts being chucked in there. So definitely worth looking through. Martin, you've asked a second question regarding carbon cost effectiveness to TrustMark. Obviously, Paul Phillips unfortunately had to leave a little bit early today to get to another meeting. Has anyone got any thoughts on that question? When will TrustMark allow negative figures for carbon cost effectiveness? Anyone else asked that question and got an answer?
Well, it's a sort of non-question, actually, Andy, because carbon cost effectiveness is better if it's negative. Whether it's positive or negative is immaterial. The result, the lower the number, including going negative, the better the carbon cost effectiveness. So there's absolutely no reason why TrustMark should not allow negative figures for carbon cost effectiveness. It's presumably just something in their database that doesn't like the negative number. But actually, a negative carbon cost effective is what we want, because it means that the measure is saving more carbon than it's using over its life. So and in fact, there's an example in the retrofit coordinator training of exactly that. So perhaps we should just pass that question to TrustMark and ask them to respond.
I think that's probably the best approach there, Peter. Yeah, we'll do that for you, Martin. Yeah, we can hear you, Martin, but for some reason it's a really strange sound. We can't really make out what you're saying, mate, unfortunately. So let's do that for you. I'll send a message over to Paul after this PAS Club, and we'll try and get you an answer, and we'll get that over to you, Martin. All right. Dean, you've been patiently waiting with your hand up. Over to you.
No, not a problem. Thank you very much. This question may be mainly directed at BEIS, but open for anyone else to have any feedback or comments on. It's in relation to flat roof insulation. Now, the changes to Eco 4, from what I understand, when installing PV or a new heating system, requires all roof insulation to be installed, and that will be loft, and that possibly could be flat roof as well. Now, flat roof is not regulated in the same manner that underfloor insulation was not regulated, and no best practice guides were published in the past for underfloor, and then everything suddenly changed. BEIS issued guidance. There's no such guidance for flat roof, and flat roof is a very important measure when you're looking at the integrity of that plywood deck, when you're looking at the current state of any membrane which protects that plywood deck from water saturation and deterioration. And as a system designer, we're looking to put together something comprehensive in relation to an approved contractor scheme with all the technical service support that you would expect from, a market leading system designer. So I suppose my question is what are people's thoughts about flat roof insulation and how we proceed? And do BEIS have any immediate plans or potential plans in the pipeline to publish some sort of best practice guide and have a 25-year guarantee requirement similar to what we have with underfloor now? But obviously it's similar to what underfloor was. There was never any regulations or quality compliance behind that, if that's a bit of a mouthful, but hopefully you get the gist of what I'm trying to, the points I'm trying to get across.
Peter?
Oh, I thought we should let Chris go first because the question was really directed towards BEIS, but I'll put my bit in after.
Yeah, sure. Chris?
So currently, I don't think we have any plans for flat roof insulation guidance to go out. It's definitely something we can look into. I can also check with. Did you say it was a Eco 4 measure that you were looking at doing it, the flat roof one?
Yep. So for example, right now, flat roof, the contractors go and they can purchase some roofing membrane, they can purchase some insulation, they can install it, potentially without any approved contractor guidance, and that, approved contractor schemes are operated with external wall, internal wall, cavity wall, and all these different measures. And I feel that flat roof is just an important measure that needs to have that quality compliance checks behind it, and perhaps even an enhanced guarantee requirement, just due to the nature of that roof being a timber plywood deck in most circumstances, an old membrane which contractors could retrofit over the top. And it's important, and we'll be putting together a surveying protocol to provide core samples and tests for those timbers within that roof space to ensure, like we do with underfloor, they're not saturated to the point of potential deterioration. So from our perspective as a system designer, we're going to try and hopefully set the standards and launch an approved contractor scheme for flat roof. But it'd be great to get the weight of BEIS, behind us and the rest of the industry to make sure we're setting the standards where they need to be for this measure, similar to how it was changed with underfloor insulation in the past.
Yeah. Dean, if you wanna drop me an email, maybe kind of outlining some of your thoughts, I can definitely spread it with the BEIS team here. It's not something which I know too much about, or but I've heard too much about, but I'm sure I can check with the colleagues internally here, and also maybe with outside colleagues as well.
That'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Peter, did you want to add your bit to it?
Only really to say that there is some guidance out there, but it's quite old. It's the BRE thermal insulation avoiding risks, which does have a chapter or a section on flat roof insulation. So that would be where I would start from. But I think it's probably, I think Dean would probably say it doesn't go as far as he wants to go with that particular topic.
No, that's right. It's about setting the standards as soon as possible, so this sort of measure doesn't get out of control. And we're making sure that checks and balances are in place to achieve the highest standards and quality as we can. So thanks for your comments, Peter.
Lovely, thank you very much. I think that looks like it's come to an end there in terms of the pre-submitted questions in the chat. Can't see any hands raised. So have we got any more for any more? You will just see that Emily just kindly put a note in the chat. Thanks, Emily. So yeah, we have got our next summit coming up on the 23rd of September. We haven't yet got a topic, and that's intentional. And the reason for that is that we want to go out to you as our members and reach out to our network to really understand the sort of things that are on your mind at the moment. Is the things keeping you awake at night, is the things that you want to learn about, hear about, and get some real value from. So we want your input. It's going to be a real quick, honestly, 60 seconds answer to a question, just to kind of give us a feel and a flavour for what it is you want to know about. If you click on that link in there, that'll take you to a very quick question, answer that question, and when that closes, it'll take you to our Eventbrite page, and then you can obviously then register for our next event, which is, I say, the 23rd of September. So we've already got over 70 people registered, even without even having a subject. So it's definitely going to be one that's going to be well attended, I'd say. So it's a chance for you as our members to get yourself a secured space before obviously it sells out. I say sell out, it is free. Yeah, before we can reach capacity. So if you don't mind clicking that link for us, guys, that'd be a massive, massive help. Margaret, funding retrofit, I think that's probably in relation to the summit, is it? Yeah, thank you. That's fine. We'll put that into the mix, but if you can add that into the question, actually, that'd be great. So we can collate all those and see whether there's a bit of a theme coming through, and we can obviously take it from there. But have we got any more questions? We've got 9 minutes left. If not, you're welcome to have that 9 minutes back in your day. It's entirely up to you. If you've got any questions, I will assume not. Okay. All right. Well, that just leaves me to say thank you to everybody for today. Thank you for all your contributions, your comments, your questions. And of course, to our panel, Peter Rickaby, Alan Pither, Paul Phillips, and Chris Parfitt, much appreciated. And obviously to you guys that obviously supported and helped to keep the conversation flowing. So as always, thank you very much. We will get a recording of the session as we always do, and that'll probably be available in the knowledge base next week once we've got it all edited for you and in there. So look out for that. And now I can see Andrew is kind of just unmuted and wants to ask a question. I was trying
to see how to digitally put my hand up, and I was like, oh.
You couldn't do it, so you thought you'd do it proper. Go on, that's absolutely fine. Andrew, you're very welcome. Go on.
Right, okay. Designs for photovoltaics and air source heat pumps. People have been asking us for MCS accredited designer. Can you help us out with an MCS accredited designer? Now, I've got qualifications in heating, solar, electrical qualifications, stuff like that. We've been doing the designs. What do we need to be MCS accredited, or what? You know, I understand that with some things you can do the design, you can say, yeah, it's been signed off by someone else who's got the relevant qualifications. But this is a new thing where we're saying that you need to be MCS accredited. Have you got any information on that?
Sorry, Peter, Alan, have you got anything on that?
Not immediately. I was just going to look at the PAS document to see where it does refer to MCS standards for renewables, etc. Here it is, where a measure is a system covered by the MCS, the retrofit designer shall be a specialist designer or specify of the system who is MCS certified.
So so they don't necessarily have to be MCS certified, but they need to have qualifications so that they can specify.
There must be a specialist designer or specifier of the system who is MCS certified.
Oh, so it looks like they do have to be MCS certified.
Yeah. Yes, and I'm trying to think what does MCS certify designers for, as opposed to installers.
I thought that the MCS had two elements. One is product standards, and the other is installation standards. So I mean, it's changed a lot recently since the kind of privatization of MCS, but we might need to check that, because I wasn't aware that MCS was certifying individuals or installers.
Yes, I thought it was companies rather than individuals.
Yes.
Yeah, we may need to research that.
Yeah, I've been trying to, not much success, but you know, let's wait until someone complains. That seems, well, last year when all this started, no one really knew what they were doing until someone got audited and they're like, oh, we've got to do that. So let's move on. I always come up with the great questions, don't I? What was it last time? Hydraulic balancing of radiators. But
looks like Dean might have a thought on this, or is that something else again, Dean?
It's something separate, unfortunately. I'm just hanging in the background.
Oh well,
okay,
never mind.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you anyway.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew. Dean?
Oh, you said you had to find a 9 minutes. So I thought I'd utilise the time. Hopefully I'm not stealing it away from everybody.
That's a good use.
on a Friday afternoon. And it's just an issue that's very close to my heart in terms of internal wall insulation and the BEIS back practice guide that was published, I think the back end of last year. And just wanted to get some people's feedback and thoughts on, you know, the mandatory requirement for that guidance in government schemes, especially when the guidance talks about to avoid dot and dab applications due to the inherent risk of potential interstitial condensation between the insulant and the external wall. And where a laminated board can be used on timber battens, it's been advised or recommended that windproof barriers installed along with vents installed on the external wall to vent between the insulant and the cavity. Now, as a system designer, we've done our utmost to provide all the necessary woofing modelling and vapor open solutions to align our system to compliance with that guidance, although we do still see a lot of activity of these different boards being used, despite some of the concerns raised and that I've just mentioned and the content of that guidance. It was just to try and get a wider understanding for people's interpretation of that, and certainly Peter's or Alan's, and is that being widely communicated to certainly review this guidance prior to putting together your retrofit design, and is this guidance that should be, you know, entirely adhered to in all government schemes outside of ECO, including local authority delivery and decarbonisation as well. So a bit of a mouthful, just to put my final thought in there, if I can put it that way. Just looking to try and get an understanding, have a bit of a discussion, and see what feedback I can get on that question, please.
Mm-hmm. It's a very good question, actually, Dean. The guide was written by Sarah Price, and I was the chair of the steering group for it. And we have had some conversations recently with Chris about how it's interpreted. The point I think is worth making at this little point is that internal wall insulation is almost the highest risk measure in the whole retrofit set, so we have to get it right. The old way of doing it, before we had any of this stuff, was to have an externally ventilated cavity between the wall and the insulation in order to evaporate away any moisture that found its way through the insulation layer and met the cold wall. The more modern way is to bring the things together. But what the guide says, what the PAS says, and what BS 5250 says is you need to do a moisture risk assessment of the proposed construction. And obviously there are generic constructions, so you could do woofy work on the generic types. But it's quite important to do the moisture risk assessment, in my view, because otherwise you're at risk of condensation occurring behind the insulation on the surface of the wall, which is now colder than it was before, and out of sight. So it could be sitting there generating liquid water for 10 years before the problem is acknowledged. So it is high risk. And I would say what you're doing, you said you were doing the woofy work, that's absolutely essential to get it right. It means that small installers who don't have that capability will struggle to do it safely.
Okay, no, thank you. I mean, we put a lot of hard work into making sure our system's positioned where it needs to be for the least riskiest internal wall insulation option. I agree that internal wall insulation can be risky, hence the mitigating continuous mechanical extract vents. If you can, if kitchens and bathrooms are or do have to be emitted with the correct levels of background ventilation. So we've done the woofing modeling. We have a breathable system. We have a vapor open diffusion membrane as well, which is our primary specification. Certainly those areas of exposed parts of the country which are subject to severe wind, rain driven conditions on the west coast of Scotland, northwest Wales, etc. So now it was just really to try and get an understanding, has this guidance really started to bite, and the more risky measures and the identified in that document, are they starting to be perhaps walked away from now, or alternatives are being considered as opposed to the traditional methods of laminated boards? But no, thank you for your comments.
Super. Thanks, Dean. Thank you for the final question. Squeezing this right into that 60 minutes. Definitely getting your money's worth, so well done. So, yeah, thank you again to everybody. Much appreciated. Been a great session as always. And as I said before, the session will be recorded and it will be available in the knowledge base of your membership area at some point next week. So look out for that if you want to play back and obviously listen back on that recording. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much. Have a cracking weekend, everybody. And no doubt I'll speak to you all very, very soon.